participate in global forums. This has resulted in increased global representation for Africa. BRICS has also increased influence alongside other emerging markets in global politics at supranational forums such as the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. Economically, being in BRICS has provided South Africa with a window to increase markets exposure in terms of trade opportunities and increased source of foreign direct investment, increased employment and economic growth opportunities, value for money through more affordable products and services, and access to different sources of development aid. For the Portfolio Committee, the summit will constitute an oversight activity to assess the state of readiness by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation to host the summit. It will also present an opportunity for the committee to apply its people-centered oversight on international relations and cooperation to enhance the BRICS Parliamentary Forum sector, which has been on the agenda of the BRICS leaders. In this regard, the committee looks for accountability and oversight over the funding and implementation of BRICS projects for infrastructure and sustainable development undertaken in the member states and in the immediate region of SADC. The committee has discussed BRICS issues a number of times and has made several recommendations on the implementation of South Africa's BRICS strategy. In this regard, it was recommended that South Africa enhance its strategic engagement with the forum. The Portfolio Committee is further of the view that South Africa should remain in BRICS as the alliance has a political significance for the country within the global South realm. The Portfolio Committee has highlighted that one of the core benefits of this alliance, it is increased global visibility for South Africa. Other benefits of this relationship is a new approach to international relations based on mutual benefit and development principles. Best of all is that since the summit will be in South Africa, it presents a rare opportunity for the Portfolio Committee to participate, and the cost will be very minimal. The current oversight model limits the opportunities for the Portfolio Committee to conduct oversight on the activities of the department, as these are carried out outside the borders of the Republic. The Portfolio Committee has highlighted that one of the core benefits of this alliance is increased global visibility for South Africa. And I've already indicated other benefits. On the financial track, BRICS has established the new development bank and contingent reserve arrangement, which provides funding for important infrastructure and sustainable development projects and a safety net for BRICS countries in times of difficulty. The new development bank also has welcomed new members from across the world, such as United Arab Emirates, Uruguay, Bangladesh, and Egypt. To achieve common development has also been the aim of BRICS cooperation. It is an area that enjoys the greatest potential and most substantive results. BRICS infrastructure projects have not only added impetus to the economic growth, but also improved the local population's livelihoods. Then the Development Bank classifies projects as either sovereign or non-sovereign and applies different standards for transparency to both. Clarity is needed on how each project is classified and the nature of information that should be made public. There are structures in each member states of BRICS forums, which are civil society organizations under the umbrella body, the BRICS Civils, which monitor the activities relating to the implementation of BRICS agreements and policies. The civil society in South Africa has raised a concern that the NDB should ensure transparency in development projects, as otherwise it makes it difficult to see what the NDB and other finances or financiers are doing, what impact their investment are making, and whether they are adhering to their accountability and environmental, societal, and governance. I look forward to us engaging productively as the portfolio committee and the members of the civil society for us to learn from one another. And I also think BRICS comes in handy this year because we are on the eve of celebrating our 30 years of democracy as the Republic of South Africa. There's the introductory remarks, honorable members. We will now allow civil society organizations, according to the way they've agreed that they will make their inputs, to start making their inputs. Thank you very much, Caleb.
Thank you very much, Chair. As mentioned, we'll be starting with our Civil BRICS presentation. This is co-hosted or co-held by the Economic Justice Network and the South African BRICS Youth Association. So I will be handing over to Simon Vilakazi and thereafter Raymond Matlala. Simon, you may go ahead to make your contributions on the Civil BRICS concept document and introduction to South Africa's Civil BRICS contributions and planned activities for 2023.
Simon, you're not audible.
Simon, you're still not audible. Raymond, may I ask you to continue while I just try to call Simon offline?
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Arina. Good afternoon again, honorable members and members of the civil society and members of the staff of the committee. As Arina has indicated, so the South African BRICS Youth Association is an NPO which works with EJN in ensuring that we provide secretariat support that would see the success of our civil BRICS. Maybe just to give a little bit of context in terms of where civil BRICS was conceived. So I think the first civil BRICS forum was held in Russia in 2015, and South African civil society organizations were invited to participate there. And since then, it has been held annually, except for 2019 in Brazil, but after which it was held again annually until now. And from our side, South Africa, we've also hosted 2 of those, and this will be the 3rd one that we will be hosting. The 2018 one, that's where we did a lot of provincial consultations, regional consultations to get the inputs. We had about, in total, about 12 to 15 events and activities that consolidated the inputs and led to the policy recommendations, which were shared with DECO through the Office of the Sherpa, Ambassador Sukla. In this year, we are looking at 5, and I'm going to speak more on activities, and when Simon comes, he can look at the overview. On this year's agenda, we're looking at 5 seminars. In those 5 seminars, we're looking to cover at least each of the 5 priorities of South Africa, which is your just transition, education and skills for the future, after post-COVID economic recoveries, and so forth. So in each of those 5, each 5 would have a lead, and it will be online. We invite all the BRICS member states into those 5 seminars to do presentations and contribution to the actual topic and building up to the topics that would then be finalized and formed as policy recommendations to the Civil BRICS Forum, which we plan and anticipate to host in June. In those 5, we also plan to do provincial consultations due to lack of resources as civil society. So if you look at other BRICS chapters like your SA BRICS think tank, SA BRICS Women Alliance, SA BRICS Business Council, they kind of have home within specific departments. So SA think tank has a home within the Department of Higher Education and Training, while Small Business Development Department hosts Women Business Alliance, and BCC, BRICS Business Council, has a home within the DTIC. So as civil society, because we are civil society, there's a lot of autonomy issues, there's a lot of free spacing. We do not have a host within the department. So resources becomes a little bit tricky. So what we've planned to do is to have combined provincial consultations, and we combine them in 3 coast, inland, and the other inland the inlands would be 2, and with coast 1 event. So we're planning to have 3 events, but which includes all the 9 provinces, and we invite civil society organizations, civil activists in those specific provinces to contribute to the key deliverables, or rather the priorities of South Africa through Civil BRICS. After which we plan then to have the pre-BRICS Forum, where we consolidate all of those consolidations from consultations. Then that leads into the final Civil BRICS Forum, which we anticipate to host around about June, depending on resources. I'm not sure, Arina, if Simon is back to give the high-level overview.
I think he's back. He's just indicated on WhatsApp. Simon, are you ready?
I'm back. My apologies for the sudden disconnection. It was beyond my control. It happened in the building. Comrade Ray has already highlighted a number of things that I was going to highlight as well. But let me just start by saying that it's like who we are in terms of us within the BRICS. My presentation will just touch based on what the Economic Justice Network is. We are a faith-based organization, an FBO. We belong to the 12 National Councils of Churches. May I just check, am I audible?
Yes, Simon, you are.
Okay, thank you. We belong to the 12 National Councils of Churches in the Southern Africa Development Community, that is the SADC region, including here in South Africa, the South African Council of Churches. So SACC is our mother organization here in South Africa. As EJN, we have been requested to coordinate the Civil BRICS Forum since 2013. So we've been assisting with the coordination of the civil society participation in the BRICS. So I think just to add some more emphasis on what Comrade Raymond has said, the Civil BRICS Forum itself is a platform that is aimed at enabling the South African civil society to make inputs into the formal BRICS processes and focus issues. So that means we participate in terms of bringing the voice of civil society and also the ordinary people into the BRICS. We, as the Civil BRICS Forum, we represent the CSOs from South Africa, the SADC region, and the Africa continent as well, because we believe that South Africa's membership in the BRICS, it should also relate to the continent, as the chairperson has alluded in the presentation earlier. So we deal with issues of the BRICS as they affect ordinary citizens, our constituency, so that their voices and their concerns are not left outside of the deliberations. So Comrade Ray indicated that we were planning to have activities that we put in our document we shared with DECO. And in that document, we indicated that we are planning to take the BRICS to ordinary people in the communities through provincial consultations. This is very important to us because we feel that we cannot just have a BRICS that talks above the people, the ordinary people, if I may add. It should also be taken to the ordinary people through the CBOs that they are working with. So this will be done in the provinces and the meetings. We're planning all the provincial consultations to be in person because we know that our ordinary people, not all of them can be able to join discussions virtually. So these consultations will take priority issues of South Africa BRICS chairship, and then the issues will be explained to the people, and the people will have their opportunity of asking questions and also expressing their concerns. And then we will try to answer as much as we can in terms of the questions that come from the people. So, but this will be important because these consultations will make it possible for people to know why is BRICS important and how it relates to our everyday lives as people of South Africa. So another element of the activities that Comrade Ray just alluded to, and I'll just be short on this as well, so that I don't repeat, are the Civil BRICS Forum webinars. These webinars will enable the CSOs to make inputs into BRICS SA chairship and the focus issues. They will include the participation of CSOs from South Africa, the SADC region, the Africa continent, and from other BRICS member countries, because we also feel that like we were having last year and the year before last year, that we need to enable
Sorry, Simon, I don't know if you're still on, but you're no longer audible. Can you hear me?
Sorry, Arena, he is not audible.
I understand. I think let us see if he disconnects, and perhaps if he connects again, maybe he can give input at the Q&A section. But since we are missing Colette, let me jump straight to Sibulele Poswayo, who will be presenting on her work on gender. Thank you, Sibulele.
Thanks, Arina. Protocol has already been observed. Allow me to, it has been established, so allow me to observe it. Again, I'm Sibulele Poswayo from the Border Rural Committee, BRC, and the Inequality Movement. BRC is a land and human rights organization that works on ensuring that there is equality to access to land, particularly on areas where land disposition has occurred, and we engage on ensuring that communities are able to access compensation for the land. The Inequality Movement has become a global movement of feminists within the South that seek to ensure rural women's beneficiation from multilateral spaces. So I'd just like to take maybe just 5 minutes, honorable members, to share with you some successes, some challenges, and hopefully touch your hearts in terms of how you could assist the ways that women can benefit from, particularly in this instance, the BRICS. So just to give a bit of background, we have been in 2013 during South Africa's presidency, and in collaboration with strong women in leadership like your Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, looked at how women could benefit or from the engagements that South Africa continues to have within the BRICS. And as time moved on, when we went to Fortaleza in Brazil, we continued the engagements, albeit all informal. The beauty of it was that our BRICS Sherpa, Professor Anil Suklal, has always been receptive to both general civil society, but particularly on how women can ensure beneficiation, whether it's for sustainable livelihoods or whether it's to benefit from engagements, women in leadership, and so forth. When we got to Moscow in Russia in 2015, during the Russian presidency, the civil BRICS was formalized, yet not institutionalized deliberately so, because we feel we need a bit of autonomy. But it is during that presidency that the role of women was concretized. And that continued deliberately so all the way through South Africa's presidency in 2018. If you remember, South Africa's darling issues in 2018 were around a women forum, as well as a vaccine center. And if you can think out of the blue, imagine what would have happened if all the women in all the BRICS countries would have pushed our states. We probably would have had that vaccine center already running by the time COVID started. So fast forward, we have been asked by civil societies within the BRICS to lead a gender equality working group as the Inequality Movement. One of the roles, as our colleagues have said before, was to ensure that we provide strategic recommendations that will find expression in the leaders' declarations. So I'd just like to share with you 3 of those recommendations, which we are concrete, bite-sized, and which we hope that the committee will work with us to ensure that we keep pushing and pushing for the realization of these recommendations. The first one, we have been calling for the BRICS Bank, particularly in the African Regional Center, to have a gender desk. The role of this gender desk will do exactly the kind of work, monitoring and evaluation kind of work that the committee does. For example, monitor and evaluate how women are impacted by infrastructure projects funded by the New Development Bank. For example, our colleague will engage and share with you some findings we found in the Lesotho Highlands water projects where women have been displaced. So we seek to understand how are women compensated, how are they benefiting, how are they challenged, for example, around gender-based violence and femicide. Once you start having an infrastructure project, you do find new people in the community, your contractors, you get young women who are attracted to these men, you get the increase of HIV and AIDS scourge, you get the increase of teenage pregnancies. And so how do we ensure that the new development bank has a gender desk that is sensitive to the impact of women, of beautiful infrastructure projects like your NDP funded projects? So how are we ensuring social and environmental safeguards? We are currently in our just transition. We are getting funding that is coming from IFIs into your structures like your ESCOM. How are we ensuring that women's rights are kept at the forefront? How are we ensuring that environmental rights of communities affected positively or negatively by infrastructure projects are put to the core? So that is the first ask that we wanted, that gender desk, which will have a gender expert, which will be sensitive and have a gendered lens when monitoring and evaluating projects. That was our first ask. The second ask was very, very sensitive in that South Africa for a number of years was not compliant with the CEDAW. Now, CEDAW is your convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, and it's a UN treaty. But the reason why we pushed this recommendation forward was that all the BRICS countries are part of the UN United Nations, and we then ensured that we could use this approach. There was amazing success. We are now compliant. South Africa is fully able to be monitored by civil societies. In fact, we as the Inequality Movement led civil societies to monitor that approach last year, and we continue. The third and last ask is that we specifically wanted to ensure that we bring forth the issues of gender-based violence and femicide as a democratic country. And as a country with a national strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide, we are at an amazing position. Particularly the committee, you are at an amazing position because there are other countries within the BRICS, including those that are BRICS plus, who do not have the ability to even engage on a word called gender, on an issue relating to LGBTQI plus communities. So how can you then, as committee members, Honorable Chair and Honorable members, hold our hand, work with us to ensure that these three bite-sized asks on a gender desk at the ARC, and the ARC has been very receptive to us. We've met as a team. However, there are always challenges around country systems. How do we, push it to country systems, engage your treasury? We need to have the new development bank able to devise a gender strategy that will be sensitive and that will ensure safeguarding of women's rights. And I would like to leave it at that before I take more of your time, Arina, except just to say that these BRICS countries, this is an opportune time. In 2 years' time, South Africa will be hosting G20. All the BRICS countries are in the G20. Some of the BRICS plus countries are in the G20. There is a pool called the Women 20, which is a strategy, a structure where women engage on gender equality. I think that is one of the biggest opportunities, that when we host the G20, we are then able to lead the Women 20 as well. Currently, it's presided in India. Next year is in Brazil. So, Honorable Chair, 2 years to go. Perhaps you could hold our hand and we could fly high and ensure that South Africa leads Africa and the diaspora in ensuring that we lead both BRICS as well as Women 20.
Thank you so much, Sibulele. I really want to show my appreciation to the speakers in session one's panel, Simon in absentia, Raymond, and as well as Sibulele. Chair, I know we are running over the program time. For example, we were supposed to have a Q&A session ending now, but if possible, will it be possible to allow for another 5 to 10 minutes and we see where we catch up some time in the next session, but if we can have 5 to 10 minutes for honorable members to engage and ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentations, well informed. Honorable members, we will now take hands from yourselves to interact with the presentations. I did get an indication from Honorable Meshwe that he will do everything possible humanly to continue to be part of the meeting, but that human capability may not enable him to control other things like ESCOM, energy, and so on, availability. So, Dr. Meshwe, I thought I must, as a great, present your apology. Let's take the hands, honorable members. Comrade, Honorable Mpanza, continue, ma'am.
Okay, no, thanks very much, Chairperson, and greetings to the leader of the civil society and the team that she's going with, and all members and comrades. No, I think, Chairperson, this session is a very important session. As you have eloquently outlined, our role as a parliamentary committee in issues of this nature. I won't repeat what you have said, Chair. And I think I agree fully with the presenters. This is work in progress, and there is a hope for greater things to happen with this BRICS fora that South Africa is also a member of. My suggestion, Chair, would be to say, as you have also suggested in the earlier meeting that we had with the bank, that maybe before we also conclude our term of office next year, let us have another round of this session, and maybe at that time allocate or dedicate more time, because I feel that the civil society role is very, very much important in making sure that there is ongoing dialogue and discourse amongst ourselves with regard to the issue of BRICS, but also on all issues that are relevant to international relations and cooperation, because there's so much that is happening globally. And I think we will be, all of us be enriched by the collective wisdom of all of us when we sit around the table and we brainstorm and explore opportunities and identify the challenges and solutions in our engagement. I hope, Chair, that, and I was glad that no one raised the issue because I will just preempt it before I conclude, Chair, the issue of the warrant of arrest of the Russian president, because we will not be in a position as a portfolio committee to respond to such issues, because issues that are political in nature, and the political principals will be meeting, and also the department will be able to handle such matter, and then we'll then get a briefing as to what is the way forward. But I'm glad that the presenters and all the participants have not yet raised that issue, but I felt that let me just preempt it so that whoever maybe is tempted to raise it without preventing people from raising it, but they will know that we might not be, as a portfolio committee, to be in a position to satisfactorily respond to what they will be raising. Thanks very much, Chairperson.
I think we have lost Honorable Mpanza. Austembi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question would go to Umamu Poswayo. Apologies if ngikubize ngesibongo ekungasona sakho Mamu Poswayo. But Chair, I want to just check, do we have any relations or assistance or any coordination with the UN Women Organization? Noting that we have one of Dr. Tlaledi, who is also representing us in the UN. And what happens when women, the African women mostly in SADC, like you might have noticed in Mozambique, where there was insurgencies, and also in Eswatini, where heads of states conduct inhumane and oppress their people. And as we may know, it's mostly women that suffer the most. What type of assistance or what type of education do we provide as South Africa to those type of environments where mostly it's African women that suffer a lot? So I just wanted to check if, do they have any form of coordination also with the UN Women Organization? Thanks, Chair.
Would you like me to respond, Chair?
Honorable Msani.
Yes, Chair, I was done.
Oh, you were done.
Yeah, I think she captured my question, because I can see
no
she's
problem.
ready to respond. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Msani. In your response, civil society organizations, is it possible for you to indicate to us on how you came to be established, and how do you network among yourselves and member states within the BRICS countries? Is there a direct formal relationship or interaction platform between the member states and yourselves? It's just a general question to anyone. Those are the only ones we have for you. We can have different responses. Thank you very much.
Perhaps, Chair, I could just respond to Honorable Sane and then hand over to our leaders in terms of the secondary question. It's so amazing that you asked that, Honorable Sane, because one of the biggest challenges that civil society is facing at this point in time, particularly in South Africa, is resource mobilization. And that is because philanthropists and funders are realizing the need that least developed countries, at least the 46 UN identified LDCs who just met in Qatar a couple of weeks ago, are in dire need of the funding. So the challenge we're facing as South African civil society is the dwindling funding to any amazing initiatives that we can push. And so the UN office, how we engage with them is there are calls that are put out and we respond, but most often than not, the challenge is that we are constantly told there are more needier organizations in your Guineas, in your Malawis. So it would be amazing if you could link us with Dr. Tlaledi to just share some of the amazing work that you're doing and see how we can work around that. We do have a relation with the CSW in New York at this point in time, but to bring it down to where we are, we would appreciate those kind of linkages. And then in terms of your question as to how we engage with assisting women that are affected by, women are the bearers. We bear the brunt of most things. If it's not the bearer, we bear the brunt of disease, we bear the brunt of violence, cross-country, interterrestrial violence. And so how we engage is with sister organizations. There is a colleague of ours here who might be able to respond better to that question. She's coming from from Lesotho, and she'd be able to share with you the kind of partnerships that we have as South Africa with our other SADC as well as diaspora colleagues. Thanks, Honorable Chair.
Yes, leadership of civil society.
Apologies, Chair.
You
So
can decide the sequence in which you want to
thank you so much, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, Honourable Chair, I'm definitely not leadership of civil society on this side, but I'd just like to ask Raymond Matlala if he'd like to give an input, especially to your question on how we engage other BRICS countries. If not, I can also give an input on that. Raymond, would you like to make an input on that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Can't hear you. You're unmuted.
All right. Thanks, Harina. So basically, what we've been doing is within the South African space, we do work closely with the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. And in fact, this year, we are talking about expanding the network. So we felt that, we need more voices, and that is why the concept of consultations. But moreover is we have also issued a form, a Google form, where we've sent it through to those who can use electronic platforms to indicate the interest of being part of Civil BRICS, because we want to open it as wide as we can, so that we encompassate the views of civil society, not just a few number of organizations. I think secondly, in terms of other countries, we do work with a number of civil society organizations within other countries, but also it is not anything formal. So, for example, if we work with, I'll give you an example within the youth forum, the youth sphere. We work with Russia Africa BRICS Office for International Cooperation. In Russia, we work with BRICS International Forum in India. We work with IES in Brazil, and we also work with GBRICS in Brazil. It's a think tank sitting in the University of Sao Paulo. And we work with Confucius Institute in China. So at least for each member state, we have an organization that we work with. But more to that is that we also work with other civil society organizations. And I think Sibulelo is in a better position to even name a few there, because she's been working with them more than myself in this sphere in terms of getting inputs and ensuring that we get inputs from their civil society community instead of just an organizational view, because they are more into structures that exist within those countries. But maybe in short is that we have no official relationships to say this is the official relationship and we've signed an MOU and MOA within the civil BRICS sphere. We don't have such as in yet. Thank you, Arina.
Thank you, Raymond. If I may just make a quick point on how the network came to be established. I think Marianne was actually part of that process, and unless I'm mistaken, the first civil BRICS was held in Ufa in 2013, and the invitations were then issued to civil society, and they came to the discussion as such in Russia. Now, as Raymond has also mentioned, BRICS civil society is very, the interpretation is incredibly different. So where it's gained a lot more traction by comparison is where it's been institutionalized, for example, in China, India, and Russia. But we're also noting a smaller civil space for a grassroots engagement in that case. And as you are very well acquainted, South African civil society ranges. And there is an opportunity from someone working in a bigger organization, an NGO, to churches, to individuals, to very, very much grassroots organizations to actually come together. Now, in maintaining such a network and working together has proven problematic, or rather difficult, let me rather say that, because the difficulty comes in with the resources in raising this kind of capital to engage. Again, similar problem. I think Sabia, as Raymond has been engaging, has had the best lessons possible, the Youth Association, in actually showing the rest of civil society how they can approach building networks and fostering networks. But at the moment, apart from the year-on-year engagement, which in the last year has been virtual since COVID, then the maintaining the network is challenged because civil society who engages, their issues, their bread and butter issues are local, national issues. And it's not always easy to speak to an international relations agenda in this. But those are just some points I wanted to raise. It is a work in progress, so watch this space, I guess. Unless there is another input to answer the question, I think I'm done.
Are you done?
Yes, Honourable Chair, I'm done. I don't think there is another answer from civil society.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to make a proposal that we must, in addition to what Honourable Mpanza has suggested, that we must look at the possibility of meeting you physically as the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa before the next round of national elections next year. The second thing, which I think is important, will be yourselves working on a proposal to the BRICS member states to table formally an item in August on how, as member states within BRICS, they must formally take a decision to recognize the civil society organizations, to work with them, and to support them. From our side as the portfolio committee, we will make that proposal on your behalf to South Africa. But it will help also if you can write something to us so that everybody can see that it doesn't originate from us. It originates from you, and that we support you, because civil society is an extension in a way of oversight body by parliament, even if it's outside the formal institution called parliament, but you are an extension as part of society to help us in doing oversight on the executive, in making laws, because you can propose laws that we can suggest to member states, but also people's participation or public participation. So I think it will be very important for us to do that. I don't know if from your side you have agreed on someone who can do the closing remarks on behalf of everyone.
Sorry, Chairperson, there is a second session. There are some more presenters who are supposed to.
Oh, I thought, I was
It
looking
was
at
the
what
third
I have here. I thought we are done.
No,
Okay.
Chairperson, not yet. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let's go to the next presentation. But I hope you take my proposal and proposal made by Honorable Mpanza. Let's go to the next one.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. It is duly noted, and we have a number of those things in the works, but thank you for the proposal. We know exactly how to target it now. So for the next session, session 2, I'm noting we have 50 minutes left, actually 48 minutes left. I'm going to try my best to speed everyone along. This presentation is specifically on the research done by the Civil Society Forum on the New Development Bank. Let me hand over to Joseph, who can just give us a very quick introduction to this project. Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you so much, Arina. And thank you so much for the portfolio for this opportunity. I will try to be so brief. I'm so really encouraged by the comment by the chairperson of the committee about participation. And that's why actually we are here, and that's why we were formed. As I mentioned earlier on, my name is Joseph Eliabson, and I work for African Monitor. African Monitor is based in Cape Town, but works across selected African countries. It was established in 2006 by Archbishop Njongonkulu Ndungane, a former Anglican Archbishop of Cape Town. You might know him. He's the one who replaced the Archbishop Tutu when he retired. So what we do at African Monitor, we work to bring a strong additional African voice to the development agenda by making sure that citizens have the capacity, platforms, and opportunity to participate in the decision-making process. So you will understand why we are so encouraged by your comment. In South Africa, our program strategy seeks to promote a people-centered and citizen-led development. Our flag project is the Agenda 2063 and the SDG 2030, because we hope that this framework, including the BRICS project or including the BRICS bank, will be ineffective if not implemented at the national level where citizens can participate. Hence, our interest to see the NDB to have a better approach to include the citizen voice. As you know, the New Development Bank was established in 2014. From the CSOs, the civil society, its creation was seen as a step in the reform of the global financial architecture. In 2017, the NDB opened its first regional center, which was called the African Regional Center in Johannesburg. And it was aimed to not only be the face of the bank in the region, but to also play an active role in project development. So the Civil Society Forum on the New Development Bank is co-chaired by Oxfam South Africa and African Monitor. And thank you so much, Marianne, for the work we have done for this to be where we are now. It was established in 2018 under Civil BRICS, where South Africa acted as a chair on the 10th BRICS Summit in Johannesburg. So the Civil Society, we engage other partners on the new development bank so that they can support development that is pro-poor, inclusive, and accountable to the benefit of all, especially communities, women and youth in South Africa and the region. That you saw our colleagues from Lesotho. Yeah. So the civil society was hoping that the NDB would allow the voice from affected communities where NDB projects are located to be heard, or where their borrowers are implementing the project, such as where ESCOM is implementing project Transnet or the South African National Road Agency. But the problem, it has not been the case. When communities, you will understand from colleagues who are going to come after me, especially on some few projects, they will present what's happening. But before I hand over to them, we really want to thank the portfolio committee for your support. We also acknowledge that your members did work with us in 2022 when we led the visit in Marapong, the Parade in Limpopo. That was in April 22. But also we acknowledge your participation on the information exchange meeting, which was hosted in Cape Town in 2021 and also December 2022. Just to conclude, Chairperson, because our very capable moderator, Arina, has warned us that if we go over the minute, we won't be invited again. We really hope to see this upcoming summit to be an opportunity for the NDB to learn lessons from approaches and some mistakes which have been done in the past. And we hope also that it will be an effective opportunity to engage with civil society. And I'm happy that you just alluded to that. So we are so happy, and we think that this will really increase or make even a reality the independent accountability mechanism, which is supposed to be an open process where citizens who are affected by project can even lodge complaint. I will stop here because my colleagues will present on some of the activities or projects which are being implemented. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Just to give clarity, and perhaps this is what Kanisile was going to report on, the CSF NDB, which is the very neat acronym we have for the working group, is that the group has engaged members of parliament in the past. So when Joseph referred to the group, I think he referred to members of parliament in spirit. So since 2021, there's been 3 engagements, the first one being an information session in Cape Town, the next one being an oversight visit to Lepalale, and the third being another information session. So I'm more than happy to email just an update more on those engagements, but let me rather hand over to Kamal and for him to give his inputs in terms of South Africa's engagement of international financial institutions. Thanks, Kamal.
Thank you, colleagues. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
Perfectly so, Kamal. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues and comrades. It's a pleasure to be here to present to you today. I'm going to cover some broad issues around international financial institutions more generally, but also through the lens of COVID-19 lending to South Africa and pulling out some of the learnings and policy implications of that lending. So just to look very briefly at IFIs before COVID-19, most of the lending from IFIs between 2015 and 2019 came from the New Development Bank, who made a presentation earlier today through their director. The other parts of this lending, $1.4 billion, came from the African Development Bank and $1 billion from the World Bank. This changed, this makeup changed quite quickly during COVID-19, in which pretty much a quarter over the last 10 years, a quarter of the lending has now come from the IMF, a quarter from the World Bank, a quarter from the New Development Bank, and about a quarter from the African Development Bank. Over this period between 2011 and 2022, there's been about $4.5 billion US dollars in lending that has come from the African Development Bank. Quite consistently, you can see here in the green lines, which is pretty much the same amount as what the World Bank, as what the IMF, lent during COVID of $4.3 billion US dollars. So since 2018, there's been this quite steep increase in lending from international financial institutions, and it's from two main reasons. The first is a proliferation of lending from the New Development Bank, the BRICS Bank, and two, lending during COVID to respond to the pandemic. What we did at the IEJ is we modeled what are the interest rates on these on the COVID-19 loans, because unfortunately this wasn't made transparently by the executive. South Africans didn't really know exactly how much these loans were going to cost us. And part of the reason for that is because the interest rates are linked to interbank lending rates, which are often difficult to determine because they kind of set according to what banks lend each other. And most of the banks from the New Development Bank, the IMF, and the African Development Bank, and the New Development Bank came in US foreign currency. So it is very difficult to estimate exactly how much the actual interest rate payments for these loans would be. But what we did is we estimated it to be about $45 billion US dollars. This is something from a parliamentary perspective that we believe should be made, the calculations and the estimates of how much international loans cost should be made public on the websites of these banks, should be made public through parliamentary processes as well. So the other thing that we did in looking at this lending is we looked at, was this lending cheaper in comparison to what the government or Treasury could have borrowed on local bond markets? And from what you can see in the last two columns, generally the IFI lending was much cheaper than what we could have borrowed on local debt markets. I think that it's important, to just put this lending into context very quickly. So what we lent, what we borrowed from these IFIs is 141 billion rands, or about 8.8 billion US dollars. And in the broader scheme of things, this only makes up about 3.5% of all sovereign debt. And then in terms of how much this is in comparison to what the state is able to raise in taxes, I mean, in 2022, the state was able to raise 1.56 trillion rands, and the debt from IFIs only makes up about 8.5% of that. And I raised this point about taxes and overall debt as just a specific point to say, yes, we were in an economic crisis during COVID-19. However, economic crises don't automatically mean that we need to turn to international financial institutions if we're able to raise resources locally through other sources of debt windows, through monetary policy, through taxes. Now, I've kind of just mentioned the cost of these loans very briefly, but I'd like us to turn specifically for this committee to some of the costs that are incurred outside of the remit of actual money, right? The actual resources. And this opens up a discussion around conditionalities, right? So the loan that South Africa took from the World Bank recently was a development policy operation, which started in 2004. These loans started, and they were kind of a repackaging of structural adjustment loans that come from the 1970s, at which point the World Bank decided to turn from project loans to programmatic lending. And along with the IMF, pushed an entire agenda that is known otherwise as the Washington Consensus, which the committee will be familiar with, right? But just to make the point that there is a repeating history that's happening currently around conditionalities, right? Conditionalities have been proven to undermine the policy space that should be made democratically by citizens through institutions like this House. And what was clear is that during COVID-19, a lot of the lending from the World Bank and the IMF particularly involved what is otherwise known as development policy operations or other lending windows that had implications on the sovereignty of borrowing countries and imposed on their policy space, right? And if we look at the evidence from other parts of the world, it's quite clear that a lot of these policies follow the consistent kind of neoliberal Washington Consensus agenda. And I'm mentioning this quite quickly because the same thing occurred in South Africa. In our lending from the World Bank, we signed a loan agreement that had binding conditionalities. In other words, the World Bank only gave us the money after we had fulfilled a certain set of policy action items, right? So there's a set of about 7 policies that we had to fulfill, which I'll get into in a second, but it also involved us having an adequate macroeconomic framework, right? So in other words, the World Bank only dispersed its COVID emergency funds to us in 2022, 2 years after the pandemic. That's when the money came. And it was on the condition of a macroeconomic framework that was developed with the IMF and with the African Development Bank that involved things like fiscal consolidation after the pandemic, ending of the SRD grant, cutting of the public sector wage bill, and limiting expenditure on SOEs. This is quite, this has been quite a frustrating thing to find in going and reading the loan documents themselves, because a lot of the people, a lot of the experts who I've been speaking to, most people who I've been speaking to, experts or not, aren't aware that there were policy conditionalities on the World Bank and on the World Bank loans, and this is quite concerning. And I would think that this is something that should be raised by either this committee or the Standing Committee on Finance. But going through the records of the Standing Committee on Finance, it looks like there was no appreciation of the fact that there were conditionalities. The exact conditionalities, some of them were related to the pandemic and some of them were unrelated. I think I'll come back to that if you'd like me to elaborate on the exact agreements. But I'm just raising this issue around conditionality very specifically because it was implemented, whether it was recommendations from the IMF. I mean, 3 of the recommendations from the IMF for fiscal consolidation, for targeting social protection schemes and cutting the public sector wage bill, all 3 of these IMF and World Bank recommendations and conditionalities were implemented by the state, right? And this is a huge, huge issue for questions of national sovereignty and the democratic determination of economic policy, which should be the remit of South African citizens, not the IMF or the World Bank. I mean, just to give you a brief example, in Kenya, for example, one of the IMF lending facilities forced the government to reduce subsidies to cooking oil, right? And other things that made eating cheap in a country in which 3 million people face acute hunger, right? So these things have direct impact on people's lives. And the same can be said for healthcare and education expenditure in South Africa that has been decreasing in real terms, just exactly in line with this advice. So I raise this not only because it's in contradiction with the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Economic Rights and not just because it's in contradiction with UN guiding principles on foreign debt and human rights, but also because there are other ways to lend that don't involve policy conditionalities or imposing on the sovereignty of states. And here I turn to the New Development Bank and their lending. I mean, the New Development Bank's lending to South Africa didn't involve any of these kind of conditionalities. And the bank has positioned itself, as probably was explained earlier by the director of the NDB, as being slightly original and different from the other banks, like the World Bank.
Kamal, just one more minute, please. Just start wrapping up, please. Thanks.
Sure. I won't go into too many details around why they claim to be original, but I'd just like to raise three contentions around the New Development Bank's approach. The first is that while the New Development Bank claims to be faster and more flexible, this has come at the cost of habitually kind of time-intensive accountability processes. And those processes take more time, but they're important to ensure transparency, democratic participation, and environmental sustainability standards are met adequately. Comparably, the New Development Bank has less transparency and weaker reporting mechanisms than the Bretton Woods institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. The new development loan agreements aren't available online, for example. They can't be accessed through the bank system of transparency. And I think that if the state and lenders don't make collectively make their dealings more open to scrutiny by Parliament, by the media, by civil society, they create this barrier to upholding the democratic decision making in the sphere of economic management and development, and indeed in international relations. And then the second contention that arises in the South African support for the New Development Bank is that the bank supports country systems. But if the New Development Bank follows country standards, then does South Africa want to be part of supporting a bank that, for example, might finance environmentally unsustainable or extractivist projects in other BRICS countries if those standards are low or weakly enforced? So if there's a lot of greenwashing happening in another BRICS country like India, China, Brazil, or Russia, are we kind of, as a 20% shareholder of that bank, are we part of, reproducing this issue, right? This problem. The last contention is that, for example, the New Development Bank strategy, the new one that was mentioned in the earlier sitting, includes plans for co-financing with other multilateral development banks. This co-financing, for example, if it's co-financed with the World Bank, should not lead to the World Bank's dominance over the New Development Bank that will push an agenda that the World Bank has been pushing in other parts of the world, and indeed in South Africa too, for privatization, liberalization, and the financialization of South Africa's economy. I've got a number of other slides, but I'm afraid that we are kind of out of time for most of it. And just to go into detail about issues of democracy, national sovereignty, and human rights, if you'd like me to elaborate on it further and some of these policy considerations, I would be more than happy to. What I'll also do, colleagues, is I will send a written submission of all of these points that I've made now. And just to inform you that we'll be having a report launch based on this information that will come out on the 18th of May. So I'd just like to extend that information to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamal. That was absolutely excellent. It always baffles me how much information you're able to share with us in such a short space of time. And I'm sorry to have to cut you off. The next person we have speaking is Leanne Govind-Samy, speaking on the future of JET IP, practical implications for finance. Apologies from Leanne, as she was in a previous meeting before she came through. Leanne, floor is yours.
Thank you, Arena, and good afternoon, honorable members. It's really great to be in conversation with you today. I think given the limited time we have, I'm just going to run through some of the issues that we as part of the NDB Civil Society Forum would like to raise. To give you a bit of a roadmap, there are two things I'd like to cover today. The first is I would like to perhaps look at the NDB support for Eskom and for very particular projects that were intended to address pollution controls at some of the Eskom plants, and broader support for Eskom, because Eskom is such a pivotal player in the JET IP, right? And then the second part of my presentation will really focus on its role, or the NDB's, I guess, non-existent role in the current JET IP process. So a bit of background on me. I am from the Center for Environmental Rights, and I head up a program called Corporate Accountability and Transparency. We focus in South Africa on looking at preventing new coal projects and enforcing constitutional laws and obligations as they relate to environmental protection. And so naturally, one of the focus areas, or the major focus areas that we have, is on Eskom. So some numbers. You've already heard about the loans that the NDB has made, right? In terms of the COVID loans to the DBSA, etc. Some of the loans that have been made to Eskom include the following. There is a clean energy and efficiency loan that was made to Eskom related to battery energy storage, and that is for $400 million USD. 480 million USD was provided to Eskom as it relates to what is called flue gas desulfurization technology, which is intended to limit the impacts of sulfur dioxide at the Medupi plant. So important to remember that while Eskom considers, and South Africa considers, the decommissioning of Eskom's coal-fired power stations, the Medupi coal-fired power plant, in terms of Eskom's just energy transition schedule, right? Its decommissioning schedule is scheduled to run up until at least 2030, latest 2050, right? What this means is that the Medupi coal-fired power station is going to result in massive air pollution, in particular pollution related to sulfur dioxide. Now, if you look at some of the implications of this, you're looking at about broader air pollution impacts beyond even SO2. Just from Medupi, 630 deaths could occur by 2029, right? This is due to air pollution. And when you consider that the NDB has provided this loan for 480 million USD to Eskom to install this technology to potentially prevent these implications, it's also important to remember that the African Development Bank and the World Bank has also provided support to Eskom. So you're looking at about 2.2 billion USD that the AFDB has provided in terms of a loan to Medupi for specific SO2 protection. And the World Bank, in its loan to Eskom, about 3.75 billion, was made for the building of Medupi, but required as a legal covenant that it install this FGD technology. Now, this technology has not yet been installed at Medupi. What we do know is that Eskom has said it needs about 100 billion, right? Million, in order to install this technology. It does not have this money. What has happened to the money that has already been provided by the AFDB and the NDB? It is very unclear. So I want to raise this in the context of our just transition and in the context of massive air pollution affecting coal-affected communities. We have a situation where you have the NDB having provided Eskom with finance for a very specific project to prevent SO2-related pollution. And yet this technology has not yet been installed. Eskom currently says it needs additional money to install this technology that it does not have. In fact, what it has said is that in order for it to install this technology, it needs a certain amount of money. It would only be installed by, let's say, 2029. So they're weighing up the risks, right? To what would it cost for them to install the technology versus potentially investing in renewable energy. But while we are not factoring in the amounts that have already been provided to them, right? So that's crucially important. I also want to raise two other things, is that aside from the 480 million USD that has already gone to Eskom for the SO2 reduction technology, you have 400 million for battery energy and storage, and you had an initial loan by the NDB to Eskom of about 6.43 billion USD, right? Of about 3.6 billion USD. And so we want to encourage, suggest to this committee that there be oversight and engagement with the NDB as well as with Eskom as to what have they really used these funds for. In particular, what have they used the SO2 abatement technology funds for? And where it comes to battery storage and clean energy and efficiency, we know how important that technology and the outcomes of that particular research or whatever it may have been for would be for our just transition. So what are the outcomes of having invested 400 million USD in Eskom for battery energy and storage and energy efficiency? Do we have clear project outcomes here, right? So I just want to go over this again because I think it's important. You had 3.6 billion USD to Eskom as an initial loan, another 400 million for battery energy and storage, 480 million for SO2 abatement technology, right? And so I'd like to leave that there. We haven't seen in the JET IP, having been published at the end of last year, the Presidential Climate Commission consulting in relation to the JET IP at the moment, we haven't seen a direct reference to the NDB's support for our JET IP. And so I think another question that we could raise with the NDB is, can you indicate where, at what level is that support being provided? We know there are loans to the DBSA around very specific infrastructure projects, sustainable infrastructure projects, but if the NDB, as part of its most recent kind of strategy, right, its global strategy, its general strategy has indicated that it has allocated 30 billion USD in particular, right? It's very important for us to kind of reflect on the exact references here, and I can send some of these references to you. In particular, as it relates to clean energy projects, we want to understand what of that money will come through to South Africa, and what do they define as clean energy projects? We know very well that in a number of different contexts, clean energy is classified as gas. And we also know very well that gas is not, it's more expensive, takes longer to build gas infrastructure, and potentially locks us into stranded assets. And so when we're thinking about what type of financing is coming in from the NDB, we need to think about how are they classifying support for South Africa as clean. I think these are all very crucial questions that we need to be asking. And I think I'll just end it there, and we look forward to questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Leanne. That was absolutely excellent and always incredibly technical. Just to add a bit of information in terms of accessing information, the civil society group has been referred to the online mechanisms on the NDB website. However, if there is a response, and it takes a while to get a response, the referral is to refer to the country system and your country office, being the ARC. Now, when approaching the ARC, the issue has been that they cannot share such information with us because of a non-disclosure agreement with the client who made the application and received the funding. But in moving on, let us hear from Francina Nkosi, who actually stays in a community impacted by Medupi plant, unless I'm mistaken. Francina, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and greetings to everyone, protocol observed. Yes, I'm a resident of Lephalale, and the health impacts are real. And I can just give a scenario. Imagine you sleep, and when you wake up, you think it's gonna rain. And when you check, no, it's not. But it's cloudy. You don't understand why it's so cloudy. And when you check, there is a sun, but you can't see where you are going. That is when there is windy and the ash dump flies. And you can imagine, will you be able to see where you're going, or will you be able to breathe? It will make a serious challenge. And the other part is that, yes, we are happy Medupi is here, but it's not benefiting us as community because we're still waiting for scrubbers. And without that, it means the power station is just generating electricity without any mitigation. And the other part is the challenge of excess of water. As communities who are living next to the big mega projects, I wish we could be able to access water like those who are in the township. But unfortunately, it's not like that because we in the rural area, I'm talking about Steenbokpan, we don't have 100% access of water. And that one is very, very much disturbing because we have to request water from the municipality. But on that situation, it will be when there are funerals. And it makes it difficult. If there's no funeral, it means you can't request water. The look of the sewage, the way it is also, it also affects us as communities. And I wish everyone could be in our area through that eye, and then you can see the way the life it is in rural areas, whilst you have a big mega project. And I don't want to talk about load shedding, because for us it's ×2, it's load shedding and load reduction. And some we don't have electricity. It's the means of just being in the dark. And you know very well, if you are in the dark, there's no safety. And for me, I wish there could be accountability and transparency towards how money can be used to empower communities and support, to make sure that the health impacts are minimized and everyone, we can be able to live harmony and reduce also the gender-based violence. Because if people are not employed, you can imagine there's that quarrels in the homes. For me, I wish there could be a turn around on making sure that as communities who are living in the fourth industrial revolution and also supported energy from the fourth biggest power plant, then we can enjoy and say, yes, we are supported. And as women, we can say, now we are also part of the project and we are empowered and our lives have changed from the bad part to the better one. I don't want to be long, but I'm just saying energy is a women's issue and women's rights are human's rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francina. I think it's unfathomable to understand the life cycle of a loan or the country relationship with an international financial institution and how it needs to be benefiting people on the ground, but it's just not finding its way there. To further this, Oxfam, as part of the project, has actually got a documentary coming out shortly, and we'll be very happy to share the film with you once it's out. But let me also move on quite quickly to Mosaletsye to give her final input on the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. As you know, Phase 2 is co-funded by NDB and AFDB. Thank you, Mosa.
Thank you, Arina, and I would like to observe the protocol. In the interest of time, I am just gonna give a summary of the challenges that are faced by the communities that have been impacted by the LHWP, specifically the Phase 2 of the LHWP. So the laws or the governing laws of the regulating laws of the project, in particular, the legal and compensation framework is being implemented or applied to community members in a way that ensures that women's land rights are violated. The framework ensures that women not only lose land from which they sustained and maintained their livelihoods, but also they lose the very compensation to remedy the same losses. It has been seen in application that the LHDA imposes on these women that compensation monies be disbursed into the account of their husbands under the pretext that the husband is usually the head of household, which has proved very problematic to our fellow women when the husbands fail to share this compensation monies with them. Yes, it may look like a family law matter, but we're saying that LHWP, LHDA, being aware of the laws that are in place in Lesotho, you owed these people a duty to at least educate them on what's on the ground in order to empower these women being part of the marginalized members of the communities. We have also the issue of water shortage, where we see that there's no access to clean water as land and oil, along with its incidental natural resources, which include water, are taken away in order to make way for construction of the dam. The pressures of this are usually greatly expressed on the women and girls who are forced to walk long distances to fetch water from LHDA campsites or other river streams, which are usually either polluted by the contractors themselves, as there have been cases of contractors spilling harmful substances into the waters from which these women and their families rely on, or such streams are in other cases shared with the women, shared with animals, and thereby posing threats to the health and livelihood of the community members. Going back to the issue of compensation legal frameworks not accommodating women, this has resulted in some of the women, because now they lose the very land out of which they had sustained and maintained their livelihoods, it has exposed them to vulnerable positions, as we've had cases, or we're handling cases where there have been sexual exploitations of young women who had intentionally engaged in transactional sex with, say, the laborers hired by LSDA in order to acquire money or gain money in order to sustain their livelihoods and that of their families. And this has also poses a risk on the HIV prevalence within the Mokhotlong district. And these issues have not been addressed. The actual construction of the dam is about to begin, contracts having been issued in November last year. So we are really apprehensive that these inequalities vetted on women by the application of the legal framework will go on if not addressed. Therefore, ours today really is just a cry for help, to touch your hearts and ask about possibility of South Africa taking cognizance of the relationship of South Africa in this very project, to charge, for lack of a better term, LSDA to hold it accountable, particularly looking at the fact that most of the financial support issued to implement this project comes from the African Development Bank, which I believe the very purpose of was over above creating economic growth for Lesotho, was to make sure that the livelihoods of community members, particularly those marginalized community members, are enhanced. And also, this would also speak to the recommendation made by my sister Sibulele that there should perhaps be a gender desk within the African Development Bank, which would provide monetary or oversight powers over how implementation of the projects funded through the bank are affecting women's socio-economic rights, or how are they enhancing women's socio-economic rights. Well, in the interest of time, I would very much love to end there.
Thank you so much, Musa.
Thank you.
From a South African vantage point, I think the alarm bells are ringing loud and clear in terms of the kind of relationship that South Africa wants to have with African countries and with African civil society as well, and relating it to understanding, the humanistic foreign policy. I think you raised very pertinent points. Honorable Chair, that is the end of our presentations. I know that that has brought us directly to the end of our allotted time, but I would like to request, if there are interested members, honorable members, if they would like to ask questions, we would be very happy to indulge. If you
Thank
may
you very
indulge.
much. Are you done, Arina?
I am, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Arino, and your collective. Very, very informative presentations indeed. Society is not just sitting on its laurels. Honorable members, this is now the opportunity to make comments. If you want to make a comment, if you want to ask questions, you can ask questions. But from my side, I must say this was very, very beneficial mutually to yourselves and ourselves. I don't see any member raising a hand. Oh, Honorable Msani.
Thank you very much, Chair. But noting the presentations that we are receiving now, I would have preferred that we receive these presentations prior to meeting the bank this morning, because these organizations are highlighting quite a lot of issues and quite a lot of information that should have been addressed with the bank earlier this morning. So as a committee chair, we are not doing much justice by actually meeting the bank prior to these organizations. And Chair, I would actually like us to highlight a number of issues that the organizations have highlighted, and as members of parliament and policymakers, we need to really pay attention and not make this a Zoom meeting the only way that we get to interact with these organizations, because of the importance of the issues that they are raising and highlighting, and noting the work that they have put in, especially with regards to, as you may know, as the EFF chair, we've strongly highlighted the impact of sovereignty in the African continent, especially coming to loans that would have been taken by member states of Africa from the IMF and the World Bank regarding the COVID-19. And the presentation done by the gentleman called Kamal is very important. And also now we are getting to see the relations that projects that are funded by the bank has with communities regarding the Lesotho Highland Water Project, and also the Medupi, and funds that are being squandered, that are being funded by this bank. So, Chair, I don't think as a committee we did justice by meeting the organizations after the bank. We should have met the organizations before the bank so that we really get a proper highlight. And I would make a recommendation, Chair, that we maybe have a meeting with these organizations in the presence of the bank representation and ourselves, in order to assist us in developing policies that would actually be beneficial to the people of this country and the
Honorable Msani network, it looks like it's failing here. There's a hand by Elroy, BJC.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
We were at a point of taking questions for clarity and input from honorable members, but I don't know if there's a matter you want to raise. So let's hear.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Honorable Chairperson. Mine is an almost direct response and a proposal to the concerns raised by Honorable Member Msani. When I introduced myself, I indicated that I have many hats, and one of them is the Parliamentary Monitoring Group. Now, as honorable members know, your minutes that happen in Parliament or virtually is very carefully recorded. The chairperson signs it off as an honest reflection of what has happened. But what concerns me is that meetings like these with specific groups that bring unique knowledge to yourselves and that you share with us may not necessarily be recorded in a manner that warrants further scrutiny, reading, and that we can build on. So my suggestion, and I haven't had a discussion with this group at all.
Before you make your suggestion, I will allow you to make your suggestion. Just before you make your suggestion, just be aware that proceedings of all portfolio committee meetings are an extension of proceedings of Parliament. So the rules insist and they instruct us to record all the proceedings of portfolio committee meetings, and they will be part of a permanent living record of Parliament. I just thought I need to deal with that part before we go far. Over to you again.
Thank you, Honorable Supra Maumapelo. It's much appreciated, and I am strengthened by your response. What I was going to suggest is, with the permission of your committee and perhaps a further discussion by this group that made the submission to you, that if a report is tabled that everybody agrees to, that the presentations that are made is recorded by civil society organizations to be shared with you in a place that can be referenced later. I just want to raise the fact that over and above the pmg.org.za group, there's also a group called pa.org.za, the People's Assembly, which is a reflection of work such as this. I'm asking whether you would consider, pending oversight of a draft, whether that would interest you as an additional matter of record. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Okay, thanks for that. There'll be no problem in us doing that at all. We have the responsibility to interact with anyone throughout the country, the African continent, wherever in the world. Now that we don't have other hands from the honorable members, Arino, I don't know if you are the one who's going to be doing the wrapping up remarks.
Chair,
and then you can. Okay, Honorable Mpanza.
Yeah, Chair, I've raised it.
Sorry, Honorable Mpanza. I see Honorable Msani is back because we lost her.
Yeah.
Maybe she wants to complete her point.
No, it's Jamnanda's chair. I just got load shedded here. I don't know where last did the committee hear me, but the point that I was making was
you were at a point of making a proposal that we meet the bank in the presence of civil society.
Yeah, that was my proposal, Chair, that we meet with the societies and the bank and us as policymakers so that we get a better understanding. And in order for us to effectively resolve the crisis that these civil societies would have great knowledge and would have greatly researched, and it would greatly assist us, Chair. That's where I was getting at before I was hit by the new normal or the new dawn, which is load shedding imposed by Jamnandas. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, yeah, it will be part of the report to be adopted by the committee. So there's no problem with that, Honorable Msani. Honorable Mpanza.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I was going to just enjoy the presentation and then end there, but since Honorable Msani has come in and the other colleague has also come in with suggestions, then I felt that let me also add my voice, Chair. One, I think I will have a slight different view to what Honorable Msani is saying in terms of how there was a sequence of our meeting today. The reason for that, Chair, I think we were meeting these important formations, which is the bank and the BRICS civil society. I think for the first time, Chair. So for me, my understanding was to be empowered as far as information is concerned, without prioritizing each one over other as to who start and who becomes the first and the second. And I think that purpose has been achieved, and we have been empowered. So that's why I'm saying so there was nothing wrong or right about the sequence of how these meetings have taken place. However, I think I agree with Honorable Msani in the proposal that she is making after have had both the BRICS civil society and the bank, that there needs to be the putting of heads together of these three important institution, which is us, Portfolio Committee, and the civil society, BRICS civil society, and the bank. But my appeal, when we are in having that kind of a meeting, I think it should be a meeting of just us engaging one another, and not be a meeting where maybe we might find ourselves as a portfolio committee mediating between the BRICS Bank and the civil society, because I think we need to explain exactly what would be the purpose of the meeting and how and what would we be hoping to achieve for that meeting. Lastly, Chair, I'm sure also this does not take away the earlier proposals that said that before we end our term, let's have a second round with the BRICS Bank, Development Bank, and also the civil society. And your right to those proposals, Chair, was that you preferable if those meetings should be physical, which I think I accept. So I think, Chair, we can package all these proposals together, but then you will then see with your team, capable Chair, team in the Portfolio Committee, how you put this into a program that will actually achieve all these proposals and suggestions that has been made by all of us. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mpanza. Just to indicate to the civil society that in terms of parliamentary process, after this meeting, there's going to be a report which is going to be drafted. The committee will then meet to look at the report, amend it where they feel we want to amend it to become a true reflection of the proceedings of today. Once it's adopted, it becomes a committee report to a formal sitting of Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. The recommendations contained in that report, as soon as the report is adopted by a sitting of Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, those recommendations will then become decisions of Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, which it must be our responsibility to make sure that they are implemented. So we must be rest assured that things will not just die along the way. Even if we are not there, those who are in this meeting as parliamentarians, future generations will take the struggle forward. So I wanted to assure you that that's what is going to happen. Arino, over to you, my sister. You can do your closing remarks. If by agreement, you are the one who's going to be doing that.
I think so, Chair. Thank you, Honourable Chair. Thank you, honourable members, for your time. I also just want to express immense gratitude to the experts of civil society who have been able to give up their resources to be here today. I have noted 3 major ways forward. while we welcome the report on the dialogue and look forward to seeing the recommendations of the committee, we recognize that this is not the last you've heard of us, and we really look forward to the next opportunity where we can engage you. The next port of call will be to also submit in writing some of the recommendations for the civil BRICS, and as well, the robust engagement on the New Development Bank will continue. We engaged in 2019 with senior members, and we look forward to this year when the annual meeting in South Africa will take place and engage robustly again there. And so with that being said, we look forward to the next invitation to the group, but we would also like to issue invitations to yourselves where appropriate. Thank you so much. Sorry, I apologize. If I to engage further on these matters with other parliamentary groups, and also with and to also contribute a stable mechanism where we engage Treasury often. So that is our future plan as well.
Okay, Arina.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
Yes, I prefer to refer to you just for this meeting as Arino. I know it's Arina.
No problem.
Yes, so it was deliberate. It was not a mistake. So I'm happy you don't have a problem with me referring to you as Arino instead of Arina. Thank you very much, Arina, for the closing remarks. The way forward, by and large, is what you have said. And over and above that, from now going forward, there will be no financial year that ends without us having an interaction. So you can be rest assured that in our schedule, we will make sure that we institutionalize the interaction so that it's not ad hoc-ish. We will use our ability as Parliament and our constitutional responsibility to hold the executive in the Republic of South Africa accountable in as far as activities relating to the Development Bank are concerned. I want to thank everybody, those who worked on all the logistics for the success of this meeting. South Africans who have been following us on all the platforms that Parliament has provided for them to learn, to suggest, to petition, to interact with members of Parliament, the civil society, the organizations. We also applaud you, and we hope in future we can also discuss with all the media in South Africa for them to explain to us why are they not working with you such that you become part of their platforms where there's going to be interaction between you and them, informing society about yourselves and your role on a consistent basis without you having to pay anything because you are part of civil society. But that will arise later as we discuss going forward with other committees and other media platforms like the SABC and so on. So I want to thank everybody, honorable members, for your patience since in the morning until now. And this is how we come to the end of this very important, critical, mutually beneficial interaction. We will meet again in future. Arina, are you based in Joburg? Or you are in another global office?
Apologies, Chair, I did not catch that.
No, I was just asking if you are in the Cape Town or Johannesburg office.
I am in Johannesburg, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, honorable members, that's how we come to the end of today's interaction. Thank you very much. Baya danki, hambane kahle, zaman sentle, re a leboga.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.